You may have noticed a strange feeling settling over your days lately, the kind that lingers quietly in the background without fully explaining itself. Maybe it feels like tension mixed with calm, or like your instincts are trying to warn you that something important is approaching before your mind can catch up. What you do not realize yet is that a major change has already begun, moving toward you behind the scenes. Somewhere, conversations are happening with your name attached to them. Documents are being reviewed, signatures are being prepared, and people who have never spoken about you before are suddenly trying to understand who you are. None of this happened by chance. A person with extraordinary wealth made a deeply personal decision before they passed, and that decision centered entirely around you. They did not choose randomly, and they were not pressured into it by circumstance. Long before this moment arrived, they had already decided that what they built, protected, and carried throughout their lifetime would eventually be placed in your hands. The unsettling part is not simply the value of what was left behind, but the silence surrounding why you were chosen. There are details connected to this decision that have remained hidden for years, and once those details finally surface, you will begin to see parts of your own life differently. The ordinary routine around you may still appear untouched, but beneath it, everything is quietly shifting into a future you never expected to step into. Listen carefully, because this is where most people lose the plot. The wealth was not gathered casually, and it was not built in a short time. This person spent decades accumulating influence, resources, properties, accounts, and connections that most people only hear about in documentaries or rumors. They lived a life surrounded by people, yet deeply alone, because the truth they carried was never meant to be shared publicly. To the world, they were respected, feared, admired, and envied. To you, they were something entirely different, something so close to your everyday life that you never questioned it. You spoke to them without realizing the weight of their decisions. You crossed paths with them without understanding how carefully those moments were arranged. They watched you grow, struggle, doubt yourself, and still keep going. And while others saw status, you saw familiarity. That familiarity is now the key to everything. Because when their final documents were written, when the silence of their last days settled in, your name was not added impulsively. It was written with certainty. It was written because you represented something no amount of money could buy, and something no other person in their circle could replace. Now comes the part that will make your heart beat faster. This inheritance is not just wealth. It is a message. It is a confession. It is a revelation that explains years of strange moments you may have dismissed as random. The sudden help that appeared when you were stuck. The unexplained protection when things should have gone wrong. The opportunities that arrived just in time, without logic. All of it traces back to this one person. They were closer to you than you ever imagined, yet bound by circumstances that made honesty impossible while they were alive. If they had spoken earlier, it would have changed your life too soon, and possibly destroyed the very future they were trying to secure for you. So they waited. They waited until the moment when you were strong enough to stand on your own feet, wise enough to question appearances, and mature enough to handle the truth without losing yourself. The wealth is the surface-level shock. The real impact is the identity of the person who left it to you, and the reason they believed you were the only one who could carry what they built forward. Understand this clearly, because confusion is natural here. You were never random in their life. You were never just another face. You were part of a long, silent plan that started long before you understood the world. This person observed your choices quietly. They saw how you treated people when no one was watching. They noticed your resilience when life pushed you into corners you did not deserve. They saw the way you doubted yourself, yet still chose integrity over shortcuts. That is why others, even those who expected everything, received nothing. This decision is already causing unrest among people who believed wealth belonged to bloodlines, contracts, or expectations. Questions are forming, assumptions are being made. Some will try to rewrite the story, some will try to challenge the truth. But the documents exist, the intentions are recorded, and the reason is unshakable. You were chosen, not because you asked, but because you never did. And that difference changes everything about what happens next. This is only the beginning, and you must stay grounded. What comes after this revelation will test your perception of trust, loyalty, and memory. Faces from your past will suddenly make sense. Conversations you forgot will replay in your mind with new meaning. Small gestures will reveal massive intentions. And the identity of this wealthy person, once fully understood, will force you to redefine your own story. This inheritance is not meant to elevate you above others in arrogance. It is meant to place you at a crossroads where responsibility meets destiny. The shock you feel right now is valid, but it is incomplete, because the truth about who they were to you is far deeper, far more personal, and far more emotional than any number written on paper. What you are about to realize in the next phase will not just explain why you were chosen. It will explain who you truly are, and why your life has always felt like it was leading towards something unseen. My beloved child, now that the first shock has settled into your bones, another layer begins to rise, slower but heavier. Because this is the stage where the mind starts connecting dots it once ignored. You may feel a strange discomfort, as if memories are rearranging themselves without your permission. This is not imagination, this is recognition. The person who left you everything was never distant from your life. They were present in ways so ordinary that you never questioned them. That is the brilliance and the cruelty of this truth. They stood close enough to see your real self, not the version you showed to impress the world, but the version that appeared in silence, in exhaustion, in moments of doubt. This is why the inheritance feels unreal, because it is colliding with familiarity. Wealth usually arrives from strangers or legends, but this one arrives from someone whose presence you normalized. And when wealth comes wrapped in familiarity, it does not feel like a gift. It feels like a revelation that quietly asks you to revisit everything you thought you understood about your past. There is a reason the truth was delayed until now. If you had known earlier who this person truly was, your choices would not have been your own. Every success would have been questioned. Every failure would have felt protected. They did not want that for you. They wanted your strength to be real, your resilience to be earned, and your values to be tested without safety nets you could see. So they lived a double existence. One life the world applauded, another life stayed deliberately ordinary around you. That balance cost them more than you realize. It meant swallowing pride, when stepping in would have been easier. It meant choosing silence in moments where a single word could have changed the entire direction of things. From the outside, it looked like distance, even absence, but it was never neglect. It was a deliberate kind of restraint, shaped by purpose rather than detachment. They observed you moving through difficulties, knowing full well they had the means to remove obstacles in an instant, yet they chose not to intervene. Not because your struggle was meaningless, but because they understood that certain forms of strength only emerge when life is allowed to push back without interference. There were choices made, long before you ever realized there was a choice at all. Decisions to remain in the background, to let experience teach what protection might have softened. Every challenge you remember now carries a hidden layer, the presence of someone who could have altered it, but intentionally did not. And now, with them gone, those moments begin to reassemble themselves into a different understanding. What once felt like absence starts to look like design, not to control your path, but to ensure you could walk it without dependency. Nothing you went through was ignored. It was witnessed quietly, held with patience, and allowed to unfold in its own form, leaving behind something sturdier than comfort ever could. That is why this inheritance carries weight beyond numbers. It carries expectation, not in the form of pressure, but in the form of faith. They believed you would not waste it trying to prove something. They believed you would use it with awareness, not entitlement. Now understand what will happen next, because this part is unavoidable. People will come forward with sudden warmth, sudden memories, sudden connections. Some will claim closeness. Some will express shock, mixed with hidden resentment. Some will question your worthiness without saying it directly. This is the moment where many people lose themselves. They start defending, explaining, justifying. You do not need to do that. The truth does not require noise. The decision was made in clarity, not confusion. Documents exist. Intentions were recorded. And the reason behind this choice does not weaken under scrutiny. The person who left you everything anticipated resistance. They anticipated doubt. That is why everything was structured carefully, legally, and unmistakably. They protected you even in absence. That alone should tell you how deeply they understood human behavior and how seriously they took your future. Hold on to this final thought as you move forward. This inheritance did not begin with money, and it will not end with money. It began with observation, patience, and belief. It ends with responsibility, self-awareness, and choice. The most shocking part is still unfolding, because soon you will fully realize who this person truly was in relation to you, not in title, but in meaning. When that realization lands, it will not feel loud. It will feel heavy, quiet, and irreversible. You will see your entire journey differently, not as a series of random events, but as a path protected from the shadows. And once that clarity arrives, you will understand why this wealth did not come earlier, and why it could never have gone to anyone else. My beloved child, the moment you begin to accept that this inheritance is real, another truth slowly presses against your awareness, and this one is far more unsettling than wealth itself. You start to realize that this person did not simply observe your life from a distance. They were emotionally invested in outcomes you never discussed with anyone. They knew when you were about to give up, even when you smiled in front of others. They sensed shifts in your energy before you spoke a word. That level of awareness does not come from coincidence or casual connection. It comes from closeness that was intentionally hidden. This is why certain moments from your past now feel charged with meaning. The advice that sounded ordinary but changed your direction. The warnings that came without explanation. The presence that appeared calm when everything around you felt unstable. This person was shaping your future quietly, not by controlling you, but by positioning you. And now, with their absence, the final piece of their involvement has surfaced, forcing you to see that your life was never as unguarded as you once believed. There is a reason your name stands alone in their final decision. Others may have known them longer. Others may have shared blood, history, or public loyalty. But none of that outweighed what they saw in you when circumstances stripped people down to their truth. They watched how you responded to unfairness. They noted how you handled loss without becoming bitter. They measured your integrity not by your words, but by what you did when no reward was promised. These observations were not casual. They were continuous. Over time, they built a quiet certainty that you were the only person who would not let this wealth consume your identity. They feared one thing more than death itself, that everything they built would be reduced to ego, greed, or noise. In you, they saw restraint. They saw humility that did not come from weakness, but from understanding. That is why this inheritance bypassed expectation and landed where it did. It was never about favor. It was about preservation of values. As this reality sinks in, another uncomfortable awareness follows. You were protected from truths that would have overwhelmed you too early. There were things you were never told, not because you were unimportant, but because you mattered too much. This person carried burdens that would have altered your emotional balance if shared prematurely. They chose silence as a form of protection, even when that silence made them appear distant, ordinary, or uninvolved. That sacrifice is rarely recognized because it leaves no visible evidence. Only now does its weight become clear. They trusted time more than explanation. They trusted your evolution more than reassurance. And now that time has done its work, they have allowed everything to surface at once. This is why the truth feels heavy. It is not just information, it is accumulated intention finally revealing itself. What happens internally at this stage is critical, and many people fail here. They become obsessed with the past, replaying every interaction, searching for signs they missed. They turn reflection into regret. Do not do that. The past unfolded exactly as it needed to. By now, the truth no longer feels distant or symbolic. It has weight to it, the kind that settles quietly into your chest and changes the way you look at everything around you. You are beginning to understand that this connection was never meant to fit inside simple definitions. That is why it stayed with you so strongly, even during moments when you could not fully explain it to yourself. Some bonds move beyond labels because they are built through recognition rather than obligation. Deep down, this person saw who you could become long before you had enough confidence to see it on your own. Their faith in you was not loud or demanding. It lived in small moments, steady presence, and decisions that carried meaning long after they were made. That is why this realization feels less like discovering something new and more like remembering something your heart already knew. Suddenly, certain memories make sense in ways they never did before. The quiet encouragement, the unspoken trust, the feeling that you were being guided towards something larger than your ordinary routine, all of it begins to connect. And with that understanding comes a strange shift inside you. The life you once thought was predictable now feels layered with purpose you had overlooked. You stop asking why this happened to you, because the answer becomes clear in its own time. Instead, you begin asking how you ever managed to see yourself as small when someone believed in your future with such certainty all along. It has moved from thought into feeling, and that is where it becomes impossible to ignore. You may notice a quiet shift inside you, a sense that something has ended and something else has begun, even though nothing visible has changed yet. This is the moment where understanding deepens beyond logic. You are not just inheriting wealth, you are inheriting perspective. The person who left you everything understood that money alone cannot guide a life. That is why they designed this final act to awaken awareness first. They wanted you to feel the gravity before you touched the power. They wanted you to recognize that what you are stepping into carries consequences, not just privileges. This is why the realization feels solemn instead of celebratory. You are standing at the edge of a truth that demands maturity, not excitement. This is where the identity of this person becomes unavoidable. Not in terms of public labels or social titles, but in the role they played when no one else was watching. They were not merely someone you knew. They were someone who understood you in a way that transcended explanation. They anticipated your reactions. They respected your silence. They trusted your instincts even when you doubted them. This level of connection cannot be fabricated, and it cannot be replaced. It grows quietly, over years of shared presence, without demands. That is why their absence feels heavier now than it did at first. You are beginning to understand that their influence did not end with their life. It was structured to continue through you, not as control, but as continuity. This inheritance is their final way of saying that what they believed in does not disappear just because they are gone. You may now start noticing subtle shifts around you. Conversations feel different. People listen differently. Situations carry an unfamiliar tension. This is because the world responds to change before it is announced. Even without words, even without confirmation, something has already altered in your energy. You are no longer moving toward possibility. Possibility is moving toward you. That shift attracts attention, not all of it genuine. Some will sense opportunity. Some will sense loss. Some will sense that something they assumed was theirs has slipped away. This is not something you caused. It is a reaction to alignment. The person who left you everything anticipated this phase, and they trusted you to navigate it with restraint. They knew you would not rush. They knew you would observe before acting. That patience is now your greatest protection. At this stage, the most important work happens in silence. Not every thought needs expression. Not every feeling needs explanation. The clarity you are developing cannot be accelerated by external validation. It must settle naturally. The person who chose you understood that loud decisions attract chaos. Quiet decisions attract stability. This is why they lived as they did around you. This is why they revealed themselves only when words could no longer interfere. You are being invited to operate from the same place of calm awareness. This is not withdrawal. This is preparation. Every moment of stillness now strengthens your ability to carry what is coming without being consumed by it. What you are about to realize next will change how you define connection. Soon, it will become clear that this inheritance was not the end of their relationship with you. It was the transition point. The bond you shared was never dependent on presence alone. It was built on understanding, respect, and trust that extends beyond time. The deeper this truth settles into your life, the more you will begin to understand that this was never simply a gift placed in your hands. It was a responsibility placed in your care, with intention, trust, and expectation attached to it. There is a difference between receiving something and being entrusted with it, and that difference will quietly influence every decision you make from this point forward. Even when others fail to understand your choices, you will feel the weight behind them, because you now recognize that this moment carries meaning beyond wealth alone. What has entered your life was never designed to create noise, attention, or temporary excitement. It arrived quietly because the person behind it understood something most people never learn. Abundance without self-awareness can destroy a person faster than struggle ever could. That is why this transition feels reflective instead of celebratory. You are not being pushed toward excess. You are being pulled toward clarity. The silence surrounding everything is forcing you to slow down long enough to recognize how much of your identity was shaped by limitation, uncertainty, and survival. Now those limits are beginning to dissolve, and that can feel just as unsettling as it is freeing. The real transformation is not financial. It is personal. You are being asked to grow into a version of yourself capable of carrying influence, opportunity, and responsibility without losing your sense of purpose. The inheritance may change your circumstances, but the deeper challenge lies in allowing it to change your understanding of who you are becoming, and realizing that this next chapter will be defined less by possession and more by the wisdom required to carry it well. And that realization alone separates you from most people who chase wealth without understanding its cost. Here is the detail that most people outside this situation will never grasp. This person did not leave you wealth because they feared what would happen to it without you. They left it to you because they feared what would happen to you without understanding the truth. The inheritance is protection, not indulgence. It shields you from a future where unanswered questions would have haunted you. It closes loops you did not know were open. It explains why certain doors never closed completely in your life, even when you thought they had. This person was not controlling outcomes. They were stabilizing possibilities. They ensured that when the truth finally arrived, it would empower you, rather than break you. That level of foresight is rare. and it was driven by care that was never meant to be visible while they were alive. Now, something internal begins to change in a noticeable way. You stop seeking validation for this event. You stop needing others to understand. You realize that the depth of this decision cannot be explained without being lived. The bond you shared with this person was not built on constant interaction. It was built on recognition. Recognition does not need explanation. It simply exists. This is why, despite the magnitude of what you are inheriting, you do not feel overwhelmed in the way others might expect. Instead, you feel steady, grounded, almost prepared. That feeling is not accidental. It is the result of years of unseen guidance that shaped your decision-making long before this moment arrived. You were being prepared without being told. This is also the moment where temptation quietly appears. Not temptation in obvious forms, but subtle ones. The temptation to rewrite your story for others. The temptation to prove something. The temptation to respond to curiosity with disclosure. Resist that urge. The person who entrusted you with everything trusted your discretion more than your ambition. They knew that power revealed too early attracts the wrong intentions. They knew that silence preserves clarity. This is why they waited until silence was the only option left. Their absence ensures that no one can manipulate their words or reinterpret their intent. All that remains is the decision itself. Clear, final, unchangeable. That clarity becomes important now because it gives you something steady to hold on to as everything around you begins to feel different. The next chapter of your life is not about stepping into the shadow of another person or trying to become a reflection of what they once were. It is about recognizing that, long before you understood your own value, someone else already saw it clearly. What they left behind was never meant to define you or suddenly make you worthy. Your worth existed before any inheritance, before any recognition, before any proof the world could measure. This was simply a reflection of the faith they quietly carried in you all along. And maybe that is the part that changes everything once it truly settles into your heart. You were not selected because you were flawless, extraordinary, or destined for perfection. You were trusted. Trusted in a way that goes deeper than praise, because trust asks for integrity when no one is watching. It asks for awareness instead of ego. This person believed you could move through life without becoming consumed by appearances, attention, or power. They believed you could carry responsibility without needing applause for every step you took. That kind of belief is rare because it is built on understanding rather than expectation. And when you finally accept that truth without resisting it, the entire story begins to shift in your mind. You stop seeing this moment as an interruption to your life and start understanding it as confirmation that your path had been quietly protected, guided, and prepared for far longer than you ever realized.